Power to Heal podcast. I'm your host, Dina T, and I'm so excited to take you on a journey through stories of everyday experts as we share the ways we've harnessed the power inside us to improve the quality of our lives and the health of our minds. We're so excited to have you here with us and hope you feel inspired and empowered to heal. Hello, and welcome back to the Empower to Heal podcast. I'm excited for you to meet a new guest of ours today. This is a woman that I had the opportunity of experiencing her gift in a women's circle, and we had a chance to grab a drink afterwards and get to know each other a little bit more. And as I got to know her, I just felt called to create a path for her wisdom to come to your ears and for you to feel like you're sitting in the room talking with her as well. So I'm excited to introduce you to Nicole Burbank. She's a peak performance and transformation coach dedicated to helping high-achieving women unlock their full potential in both their personal and their professional lives. With a background in nutritional therapy and behavioral psychology, Nicole combines the power of functional nutrition and mindset coaching to help her clients break through limitations, boost mental clarity, and optimize their physical and mental performance, all while staying present and in harmony with themselves. She's passionate about guiding others on their journey to become their best and most empowered selves. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so excited. And I have just, we've said in the past, like our conversations are so expansive and I just love what you're doing and all that stuff. So
Thank you. I'm so happy you said yes to coming on the podcast today. I was, first of all, when I met you first, it was a Hey Mama event in a circle that you were leading. And it was an opportunity for moms to come together in self-reflection and deepen their connections with themselves. And you gave this little speech around being selfish. And I loved it. So first of all, thank you for that. It's like a little permission slip for us to choose ourselves and find alignment within ourselves. And I think we could start off by talking about that, right? Because as we are women, and most of us listening to this are mothers or parents in some capacity, it's very difficult to put ourselves first, right? It's very difficult. And you've been on a journey developing this business as
yeah.
well as mothering your child and having to find that balance of you have so much to give and so many needs to fulfill, yet you're finding a way to meet your own needs so you can stay whole in it. And I would love to hear you share more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is. I think I even said that night, selfishness isn't really selfishness, it's self-preservation, right? And the big analogy I always go back to or I share with people is when we're on the plane and the oxygen mask drops, it's got to be us first. We've got to put our mask on first so we can breathe to then support everybody else around us. And so why don't we walk life in that same direction? And I, as a people pleaser, perfectionist, and a lot of wounding around wanting to be loved and not rejected and not abandoned. I mean, we carry these things, these patterns, these behaviors. Some of them are wounds or traumas. And I found myself after having my daughter so spread thin. I was overwhelmed. I was always putting everyone before myself. And I got to a really dark place. And I'm very thankful that we have amazing therapists and counselors in our community. And I got the help that I needed. But it was then that I realized if I don't start taking care of me, I won't be around for my daughter. I won't be around to impact lives the way that I was trying to. And so I, at that moment, kind of decided, and I had a little bit of a rock bottom. My now ex-husband and I separated. I left my business partnership that we were building this huge clinic and dream with. And I was really faced with, okay, I have to look in the mirror and decide how I want to show up this time. And at the time, I definitely didn't think the universe, God, whoever you believe in, was giving me this great break. I was like, holy cow, I have hit rock bottom. But now I look back and I'm like, that was the opportunity to really formulate who I became. And I had a choice. I could go this direction and continue people pleasing and being selfless, or I could really choose myself and become selfish and self-preserve. And man, I'm so thankful I took the selfish route because I do truly believe I impact far more now because my cup's so dang full because I make sure that I take care of me first.
Yes. I feel like motherhood does that to us. It brings us to this place of, excuse me, where I often say, like, I birthed my child, I rebirthed myself, right? You are forced into this new step of journey of your life where you have to shed parts of you that are no longer going to serve you, and you have to become the person that you're meant to be. And when we feel that friction and that rub, usually it's not pleasant, right? Usually it is a feeling that makes us feel like maybe this is rock bottom. I don't know if I can take this anymore. I feel so unhappy or out of alignment or anxious or depleted. And when we hit that phase, like that is such an opportunity. And in the moment, it's hard to phrase it as an opportunity, right? Like as a therapist working with moms in this season of life, I'm well aware that like we have to be cautious of first honor the bigness of it before we try to spin the perspective. But
Yeah.
when we are able to feel our feelings and open our eyes to the opportunity, it creates this space within us to take the step forward instead of fighting the shedding that is happening in our lives.
It's so, so true. And it's like once you realize nothing bad happens when you actually put yourself first, it's like a trust muscle, right? It compounds. Like I remember the first time I even stuck up to my ex-husband and set a boundary. I was like, I'm on cloud nine. I'm going to set boundaries all the time. And like, I can see it now. And you just do. But like to your point with being a mother, I do truly believe it's like the gift of being able to reparent yourself in a way because I don't know other than looking at her and I'm like, I have to show up. I have to change me. I have to be the best version of me, not only for me, but for her now. And it's so empowering. And I'm so grateful for that gift. But yeah, it's so interesting. The second I held her, I remember just being like, okay, holy cow, my life has changed forever.
So you just said something too that I think we dissect it for a second. Your awareness of like, holy cow, this is on me now, right? Like you set the boundaries, you separated from your ex-husband. You're walking a path that's requiring a lot of you all the time, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's the business that you're building that you ventured off to build on your own, whether it's mothering your child on your own, whether it's your own self development and keeping yourself whole. All of these things are what I like to call like live in the silo of doing, right? Doing,
Yeah.
doing, doing, which is very masculine energy. And I find for myself, like, when I go in the doing mindset, I forget how to be. And it's super difficult for me still to this day. Like, I have to intentionally call in my flow with my feminine or my masculine, or I'll get taken to the side. If I'm not intentional about it, I will live in the masculine for years. And I did. I lived there for years, right? As a mental health practitioner working in a public mental health system, on call services, constantly on, transition into motherhood, being needed all the time and learning this new role, I definitely disassociated from my being and my feminine flow in the beginning. And I'm curious because you coach women on this. So I want to learn your secret around, wow, how do you navigate these demands that most of us feel and are really, truly required in life to live in our masculine and care for our families, right? Like we have to have that. But how do you bring in that balance of the feminine flow?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what my whole brand is trying to do, which is redefine what peak performance is. Because even the word peak performance, so masculine, right? It's like, let's go, let's accomplish something. And don't get me wrong, I love that. I love rigidity. I love the structure. I do love playing in my masculine, but I'm also really delicate and I love being in my feminine and nurturing and calling in things. And so really it's about awareness and presence of and understanding who you are, right? Because when you identify who you are, so old me in my masculine 24/7 owning two clinics, I was trying to prove to everybody how good I was, right? So I was doing it out of external validation. Whereas now everything I do is very purposeful in the way that I want to show up as a human being and impact this world with the little time that I have. And so just even understanding your actual goal and why you're doing it. So when people come because I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner, they'll come and sometimes they want to lose weight, right? And that's part of peak performance is being the best version of yourself. And I always ask, well, why? What will it serve you, right? Because I'm looking to hear if they're still seeking external validation, right? Well, I want to get a boyfriend. I want to get, right? We've got to reframe that and understand who we want to be and why we want to be those things in a more inward way than external way. So that's the biggest thing. And then once you're aware and present of your why, then you learn to play in both. So for example, when I am building a landing page or if I'm building a funnel or a system within my business, I can play in between the masculine of having to action it, but then create very much in the feminine in the way that I word things or do things, right? So I kind of toggle back and forth, and I'm not always perfect. There are times when masculine wants to hijack. It is a very fast moving energy, right? But I implement things in my day to slow me down, to force me to have to. So for example, I took calls this morning with clients. I have this with you. And after that, I'm going to go on a long, like probably 4 or 5 mile walk and just ground myself and be in nature and be grateful and, do all the things that bring me back down. So then when I go back to my day, I'm not just like raw and masculine energy.
So I hear you describing like rituals, right? Like you weave in rituals that honor the feminine to balance out the masculine.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Yeah, you definitely have to. And another thing I think, and I know you probably can resonate with this too, is I think a lot of times this world views things in extremes. So you have to either be masculine or you have to be feminine, right? And it's like, no, we want to utilize the key aspects of all of them. We want to intertwine everything, even our parts of us that are perfectionists or type A. We want the good parts of that to come out. We don't want the obsessive to hijack, but we want to be able to say, oh, well, my type A, my organizational skills is like killer for me because I hit all my appointments, I make all my calls, I do all the things. So we honor that part, but we're not obsessive. If we don't hit every single call that day, we're not like in shame and guilt, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of balancing everything.
Yeah, learning to hold that grace for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So when I think of some of the rituals that I've incorporated into my life, so balancing my being and doing has been a goal for years, right? Flow has been a focus and a key word in my life. And as I've done that, ways that I've found connecting to myself and starting my day out in the being has served me through the days that are full of the doing, right? So when I start my mornings, I have a ritual, a very simple morning routine that I do. And it started out so simple that it took seconds. And it
Yeah,
was doing these like sunshine arms, ocean breath work, right? Like
love
just
that.
3 rotations of it took seconds to do. And then I see the sun. I go and I open up the window or I walk into the yard and I see the sun. And it's evolved as I've developed more space within myself to expand. It's expanded to like cacao ceremonies and reading in the hammock and, just being and enjoying and gardening and you name it, making sourdough. But prior to those rituals, I felt like I had no time to be. And
Oh,
there's this piece of me that really required like a reframe of if I choose to believe the limiting like belief that I have no time for myself, then I will absolutely not have time for myself. I will believe that, right?
yeah.
But if I choose to believe that I deserve 3 rotations of a breath in the morning, bare minimum, right? Bare minimum. If I can convince myself like no, I do deserve this and I can do it. I can prove to myself that I have the ability to make time for me. And then once I do that and it feels good, it invites the next stage, right? Like it invites the opening of the window and seeing the sun first thing in the morning and balancing and regulating my nervous system and doing my stretches, right? Connecting with nature. But the first step is often the hardest because we have this mental block around there's no way. I have no time. I couldn't possibly. because of all these excuses. Like, that is so true and real. Motherhood is a beautiful journey, but it can also be overwhelming. Do you often find yourself feeling isolated, struggling to find balance, and yearning for a sense of identity beyond mom? Trust me, you're not alone. Join the Empowered Mamas Club, where you'll discover a supportive community of like minded mothers. Gain valuable skills to navigate those highs and lows of motherhood, reclaim your sense of self, and become the engaged and present mom that you desire so that you can create cherished moments with your little ones. It's time to prioritize your well being and rediscover the joy in motherhood. Click the link in the show notes and join us in the Empowered Mamas Club today.
So true. And it's not even as much as not feeling it like you have enough time, the subconscious, which most people aren't even aware, the shame that is held, like because they're so not present to their thoughts, they don't even realize that I can reflect back and be like, oh, I thought my husband would be judging me if I took time for myself. Or I thought I have to put Willow before me, or, I'm a bad mother and people will judge me, right? Like I wasn't logically thinking those thoughts, but I reflect back and I was like, wow, that's actually really truly how I felt. And you said something so perfect that I always try to remind people, because they'll come and they'll be like, oh my God, like it's you are too far away from the goal. Like I can't see it. And I'm like, I started with a timer on my phone for 5 minutes of breathing, and it was awful. It was so hard to get through. I was like, oh, I'm wasting so much time right now. Like it was so hard. And much like you, it's evolved to now I sit and I journal. I have my gill, I have my affirmations. I do a meditation, a guided meditation. It's like this whole like hour-long thing now, but it wasn't that. And much like when you go to the gym and you work on your bicep or a muscle, it's going to take a minute before it grows. It takes
Yeah.
time to cultivate that. So you were right on point with the like limiting beliefs, and that's deep subconscious that I don't know. I feel like oftentimes people aren't even aware of that. They just
Yeah.
think society kind of has pushed it in this direction, and so this is what we're asked of us. And I'm like, but what if you did it this way?
Yeah.
How much greater could your life be?
Yeah. And so, most of the people that are listening to this, I feel like are on the beginning steps of their journey, right? These very first steps where they're like, okay, I feel the tug. I
Yeah.
feel the pull. Something's got to give, right? I want to understand what I'm feeling. I want to prepare for this transition differently. I want to embrace it differently so I can come out the other end in a version of myself I'm proud of, right? A version of myself I can reflect back on and say, like, wow, I was the best version of me for myself, but also for my kids or my partner or your whatever family dynamic you have.
Yeah.
And I know from being in that position. So in 2020, I started this journey. I was at this place of like, I can't possibly fathom a different way of living than what I live now, right? Because how I lived then was so all encompassing, right? I worked 60 plus hours a week. It was all crisis on call. I had a small child who needed me. I wasn't getting full night's sleep. I just could not even envision the possibility of life looking any different. And I remember having this moment where I said yes to a program, and it was a coaching program called Awaken Your Life by We Are the Women, led by Julie Santiago, which you remind me a lot of her. And I remember, like, okay, I'm going to say yes to this, and I need my husband to say yes to this because it was an investment. Like,
Yeah.
it was an investment. um, and so we had this discussion, my husband and I felt like this crumbling inside me and couldn't stop the tears from flowing of I know I can't live the way I'm living, like my body will not withstand it,
Yeah.
but I can't imagine a different way. And unless I take and devote some deep work, deep like investment in myself and going into the depths of myself to heal, I won't find another way to live, right? Like I have to take this leap of faith that I can trust that this other person in this program is going to hold me, this container is going to hold me, and I'm going to start. I'm going to try to find who I want to be. And I remember at the end of that program, it was only 12 weeks long, but at the end of that program, I had a vision of a different life and I had a direction of what immediate next steps I wanted to do that felt aligned. And I felt like empowered. I felt a breath of fresh air. And I share that story because if you're listening to this right now and you feel like there's no way, I have too many demands, too many little ones needing me right now. I must go to work or I must do this. I don't have space for this. I just want you to know I was there. I was there. And Nicole, I know you were there before too, right?
Yes.
And it starts with like a little sliver of I can do one thing to provide perspective. I can take one step. I can take one breath to get there.
Yeah. It's really that expansion, I think, is helpful. On my journey, obviously, I think there's two ways, right? The nudge where you kind of were like, okay, I see. And then my example is more of like I was kind of forced, right? Like I forced myself into a rock bottom because I didn't listen to the whispers and the nudges and the tugs. And so then the universe came at me and was like, well, we're going to cut the whole tree down and here you go, you stubborn girl. And that's okay. That was my journey. But I truly believe that I had to go through that to be the expansion for another woman to see. Because what's great is all the women that I help, I catch them right before that rock bottom. Like I'm like, oh, she is right on the edge, but she is asking for help. Wow, what a way to put yourself first. And it's oftentimes hard to monetarily invest in yourself because society has raised us in a reactive, right? We don't get treatment for cancer till after we have cancer. So we're not preventing cancer, we're just going to treat cancer, right? Or mental health sometimes, right? We don't showcase like we should be talking to therapists before something happens, right? All these things that are preventative. And so I always ask people to change that frame of reference to it's an investment in self. And the ROI on that is ridiculous because not only will you monetarily probably make more money, but your ability to love life, to be happy with life, to love like I am the most present mom and I'm a single mother entrepreneur. My life is not full of a lot of stuff, but I'm so present and there's no way I would have ever been able to be the way I am without the investment I put into myself. And so if you're at that point, I always just say, just start with maybe it's just a ritual. Maybe you don't need support yet. Maybe you just follow people on social media, or maybe you start to stop following people that are making you feel less than or making you feel a certain way. Just start to take away the negatives in your life. Start to slow down, maybe start to say maybe instead of yes all the time. Whatever it is, just you can go at your own pace. There's no right or wrong way to do anything.
Yes. I love to say maybe instead of yes all the time, especially as a people pleaser. And I find the majority of the people in my circle or that I end up working with, they are perfectionists and they are people pleasers and they are helpers, right?
Yeah.
Like if we think of the Enneagram, they're the first three in the Enneagram. Like that's like, that seems to be the majority of the moms that find their way to me. And it's so hard to say maybe because you want to appease, because you have some belief inside you that that's where your value comes from. That's where your worth comes from. And the opportunity to say maybe is a sacred pause. It's a
Yeah.
sacred pause for you to not have to say no right away when that can be very hard to say no. Somebody told me that yesterday, like saying no is the hardest thing ever. I was like, I know it is very tricky. But saying maybe creates the sacred pause for you to say maybe, like, it's not a no, it's not a yes, it's a space for you to tap in and figure out, okay, what do I need right now? Right. And what answer to this question will come is going to depend on like how much space you give yourself to reflect on what feels right. And am I saying yes out of people pleasing or achieving or trying to help? Or am
Yep.
I saying yes out of, oh, this is a hell yeah for me? Like this is 100% lined and it's going to serve me too.
Yeah, it's just it all goes back to that presence. I had at my last call before we jumped on. We were talking about this, and it's actually a male, but he was like, "Yeah, you know what I've started to do when I want to go towards food for comfort." He goes, "I take a walk, and then by the time I'm done with the walk, I don't want the junk. I want like something healthy." So it's
Mm-hmm.
again, it's just 95% of our day is subconsciously driven. So it's autopilot, right? So we're just in patterns and behaviors. And if we can raise that to, or lessen that and raise our conscious ability to even 10%, you're going to be able to stop and be like, oh, actually, I don't want to say every part of my body like is rejecting saying yes right now or rejecting this thing. And so then you start to know, and then you get to maybe where we're at, where it's an easier like, I know so intuitively it's a hard yes or it's a hard no. And I still get tested all the time, but it is a little bit easier of a flow as you develop. But it's like when you started a new job or you rode a bike for the first time, you didn't succeed the first time. It took a lot of time to get to where you're at, but then now you can get on a bike after 20 years of not riding one and be fine,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That muscle memory almost.
Yes. As you're saying that, I was also reflecting on what you said in the previous minutes around you're the most present mom that you could have ever imagined being, right? Like, and you couldn't have imagined being in this space prior to this path of development and empowerment that you've been on, this awakening and leveling up in your life. And I know almost every single parent that I work with has the desire to be present, right? They wanted a family and they
Yep.
worked towards building this dream. And now they have big feelings that are creating moments where the joy doesn't feel present and it feels difficult to be intentional because their brain plays tricks on them or um, being present means having to sit with the feelings that you have and they don't want that, right? And so coming to a space, and I think a lot of us feel that our brain, our body can be present with our children, but our brain can be on our to-do list, right? Or we're playing and all of a sudden we're like, there's a big mess. And now I know before dinner is made, like we've got to clean this up. And now I'm only focusing on this. What's your keys? What do you find? What grounds you? What do you return to? Because there's a returning, right? I think for all of us to return and return and return to being present. What are your secrets for that?
I share it with my daughter. I open that up, right? So let's just say like yesterday was a great example. She came into my office, I was still working, and she wanted to read her autobiography or something she did at school. And I noticed myself like listening, but like wanting to draw to what I was focused on. And so I realized that her energy shifted because she picked up on it too, right? And she was really excited about it. And I looked at her and I said, I'm not being present right now. I'm really focused on this right now, and I'm not being focused on you, and that's not fair to you. And I want to be present in this moment. Would it be okay if I just finish this? It should take about 5 to 10 minutes, and then I can dedicate all my time to you. That's the part, but it's scary to like be that open. One, people think that kids are not that intelligent. I'm like, they are so aware, like those types of conversations. But then I'm also teaching her in that same moment to be able to show up for herself because she's going to be like, oh, I remember when my mom was really focused, she did this. Well, I'm really focused and my friend's nagging me to do this. I know how to communicate this,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so it's just you've never been a parent. I have never been a parent. I am not going to be perfect. I'm not even going to try to be perfect. So just tell them when you're not able to show up the way. I tell her all the time as a single mom, there are a lot of times where I'm overwhelmed. I'm just overwhelmed. And so I'll sit there and I'll say, I'm super overwhelmed. I'm not as emotionally available tonight and I want to be. So, can we do something that isn't maybe as interactive? Can we maybe just snuggle and watch a movie where then my brain doesn't have to work so hard because I just don't have that energy? I wish I did, right? again, I'm showing her to check in with her own feelings. And then I'm also honoring myself as like, it's okay that you're not going to be always on. Like you're not an AI. You don't have like all the energy in the world to like dedicate. And that's okay.
You're bringing up these points that I think are key pieces to be able to achieve what you just articulated. And one of those key pieces is being able to identify our own feelings. Many of us have a hard time figuring out what the heck we are feeling, right? We'll list it under the basic categories of sad, mad, happy. Like we aren't able, many of us aren't able to dig below and identify what really is this feeling inside me right now. And it sounds like when you have those moments, you are digging down. You're taking a moment and saying, "Okay, I'm sorry. Whew, I'm feeling this way right now." And it's inhibiting, it's preventing me from this goal, this shared goal that we have together to play and be present or have a fun moment, right? Do imaginative play, whatever. And then the second thing that I see you doing that's absolutely difficult to do is you're identifying what you need. Most women I speak to, when I say, "What do you need?" they don't have an answer. They don't know. Slowing down enough to identify what we deeply need can feel daunting and overwhelming. And so I love that you're able to like pop that into like, I just need 5 or 10 minutes for this, or I need something less stimulating to engage in, right? Or I need some food because I'm realizing that I haven't eaten in 8 hours except for the pieces of your leftovers, right? Like,
Yes.
so it's what do you need? And asking ourselves that question is it can be so hard if we're out of practice.
100%. And don't expect, guys, this is the combination of like 5 years of internal work. And that's why I love, like, I have mentors myself. I'm such a big proponent, and I used to not be. I made myself super successful in not needing anyone. And it was totally built as a mask to protect myself, and it hurt me more than it made me successful. And so by no means was I just born this way. This has been so much practice on figuring out who I am. If 5 years ago you would ask me, how do you feel about something? I probably would just start crying because I didn't know even how to articulate it, right? And so the pillars of care that I take people through is first is nutrition, right? Just getting them to be mentally clear, because the brain fog from the food we eat can really affect our mental health. And there's proof behind this. Then we go into the emotional intelligence and learning how to raise your EQ so you're so aware of your feelings and emotions. And then we go into mental resilience and toughness and really building like, how do we formulate boundaries? How do we overcome obstacles? How do we become the best version of ourselves? Get rid of some of that shame and guilt. And that methodology is what exactly I did, right? And so now I use it with my clients. And again, you start so basic. I started so basic, so I don't want the fact that I'm here now to hinder anybody's ability to be like, okay, I can start, I can develop this. It takes practice and time, but it's worth it.
Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. Like, I think it's important that when people, what we do is we compare, right? We say, "Oh my gosh, like she can do that. Are you joking? Like, I don't even know what I'm feeling right now to articulate
Yeah.
it." Like, and so that silly saying, like, comparison is the thief of joy. If we're comparing ourselves to someone who's been doing this for 5 years, like,
Yeah,
that's not
no.
a fair scenario for us to look at ourselves in. It's important. Another thing that is valuable and it brings in a parenting lens. And so, looking at this through a parenting perspective, is you said some people think that their kids can't understand this degree of like a conversation, this emotional intelligence, or having this discussion. And you said, no, our children are so brilliant. And that to me is a glimpse into your parenting lens, right? And if you're on social media, which everyone listening to this is probably on social media, you're aware that there are all different parenting types that are, or approaches that are rolling around out there right now. Some of them you might hear as gentle parenting, which I have seen pros and cons of where people feel like they have to, like they can't set boundaries with their children, which is not the intent of it. But there's also something that's like conscious, it's called conscious parenting. And it's being able to see your child as a valuable, like participant in the interaction that you're having and consciously, intentionally choosing how you move forward, right? Not just a reactive way, but choosing how you move forward to support that relationship on the other end and that intellectual being that you see as capable and you see as worthy and you don't see as in a hierarchy lens, right? It's not that, well, I'm mom and so you respect me and because I say so, but it's no, you're curious. Your mind is developing. I understand why you ask these questions. I understand why you have these needs or you behave the way you behave, right? And given that information, I'm going to interact with you in a way that is aligned with my belief of you as a little human. And when we see the little human in front of us and we see them in that lens, it makes it a lot easier to say, no, I can apologize to my child. I can take responsibility for my behaviors in front of my child. It's not lessening this hierarchy that I many of us were probably raised and experiencing. It's not that we are undermining our authority, right? No. Like instead, we are supporting the development of their brain and we're teaching them. And everything that we do, they're absorbing like little sponges how to do that in their life. And they're learning how to emotionally regulate. They're learning how to navigate conversations with their peers. They're learning how to assess and understand their needs and ask for them. But there's this like piece of conscious intentional parenting that you expressed in that like very short little example that when you shift your mindset or you ask yourself, how do I want to parent? How do I see my child? That answer will help guide your breadth and your space to be able to meet your child's needs and meet your own needs in those moments. Are you on the brink of parenthood, eagerly anticipating the arrival of your little one? Take a proactive step towards preparing for the whirlwind journey ahead by joining our waitlist for the Empowered First Year Postpartum Prep course. Designed with your needs in mind, this online 4-week program offers a comprehensive blend of education, skill building, and community support to guide you through the demanding postpartum season. Don't navigate this transformative time alone. Click the link in the show notes below to join our next cohort and embark on your journey to parenthood with confidence.
Yeah. And I often see that the reason parents can't get there is they're so overwhelmed themselves. Like they're so in it that, and I was this way. And even to this day, I, again, am not perfect. I'll have moments where I'm just so scared, overwhelmed. Am I going to be alone the rest of my, like all the thoughts, I still have all the same thoughts everybody has, right? That I'll be short, right? And I don't have the capacity to show up as my best version. And so when I notice that, again, I go back to me. Oh, I'm not being selfish enough. I go right back to filling my cup. It has nothing to do with giving more, right? I have to get back to myself because when my cup's full, I am the most patient and present person. So the overwhelm part is key. Like if you are short with your kiddos and you feel that shame and guilt, which then compounds on top of feeling overwhelmed, you've got to start being more selfish. There is something going on in your life where your cup is just not full or it's depleted completely, right? And then the other thing is, I want my daughter to be the most independent thinking person. Like, I don't want her to be like, whatever mommy says I do. Like, I want her to push back a little bit because in the real world, I don't want her in a situation that is dangerous or scary where she won't stand up for herself. Right. And so I like to cultivate, and I don't know what category I would call my parenting style, but it's just independent thinking and being so consciously aware that she starts to formulate, because she'll be like, I notice at school this happens. And like, so she's like already starting to view things through her own lens and trying to determine how she feels about it, which is so cool to allow your kiddo to just be that independent thinker and like
Mhm.
decide what they like and don't like. And it
Mhm.
being okay to be completely different than what maybe your opinion is.
Yes. I do think a strong bit of wisdom for those who feel like they don't know how they want to approach parenting is to read some books on it because I I remember working in the mental health system and somebody used the word like tumbleweed, right? And they said they're like a tumbleweed, like whatever the wind blows and the energy's pushing, like they roll over to that one. And then the tides change, right? The wind blows and they're like, "Oh, back to this side," which creates confusion for our children and
Yeah.
overwhelm. And for us, it just feels like we're just like hanging by a thread. Like it's up to like our child's behaviors, how we feel, right? Like we don't set the tone for our home when we feel like a tumbleweed and we're just trying all these different things based on our energy reserve. And so there's this piece where if we didn't have the role models in our life to be the parent we want to be for our children, if something inside us tells us, hey, I want to do this a little bit differently, or this didn't feel good and I still remember it today, it still is a part of like the journey I'm working through today. I don't want to repeat that. Right. I want to break that cycle and start anew. But you don't have the role models around you for it. Social media can be a role model, but they often just show like the highlights and not the reality. But picking up some books and having some discussions and finding ways to expose yourself to people outside of your immediate circle, hiring a coach, connecting with a therapist, right?
Yep.
Going to the communities that do engage in a way that like you're like, oh wow, they're talking about raising their children differently, or man, I really like the perspective for this but I have no idea where to begin. Like this is an invitation to you to take that step out because most of us as mothers, if we haven't done the work before becoming a mother, motherhood forces us to do it. And figuring out your parenting style or approach, it doesn't have to be labeled by anything, but you have to have like a code of ethics and like values within yourself of how you're showing up, like a belief system that's rooted for parenting, that's going to force you to evolve and level up in your life. It will force you to, because if you don't have it, life gets really stinking hard, right? Like we become the tumbleweed. We become like our life is at the beck and call of the behaviors or the bigness of what's around us.
100%. And I think the kids feed off that energy. And kids, the biggest thing they need is structure and consistency. And so if we're inconsistent ourselves, their emotions are going to feel the same. And again, this isn't to shame or make someone feel guilty. It's a hope that you look inward and start to
Yes.
put yourself first, right? And just if that's the expansion piece, that's all that matters.
Yes, absolutely. Before we wrap up, is there any other tidbit of wisdom you want to share with us today? Anything that's been coming to mind?
Oh, that's a good question. I, the last few weeks have been some big changes personally and professionally for me. And I think I've always just been this quote that I I gave to my client. And this is going to sound a little masculine and a little harsh and direct, but I told him today, I said, how much more time do you want to waste showing up as somebody you don't want to be? Because you keep saying you want to be this, but you keep showing up this way. And so it's a little direct, it's a little harsh, right? But sometimes the reality is realizing that you hold all the power. You're not the victim in this. Your life can be whatever you want it to be. I mean that truly. So if you're feeling any of this resonate, don't waste any more time. Find the support, find the community, find the little rituals you need to do to just start moving the ball forward. I think that would probably that's what's been on my heart and kind of front and center lately, even for my own mission, right? Like, why am I procrastinating or why am I dilly dallying? How much more time do I want to waste?
Mm, I love it. And it's so like appropriately timed. Like right now, I know when this airs, it'll be a different season, but right now we just had last night was the lunar
Oh,
eclipse and the super full moon in Aquarius, and also the entrance into eclipse season and the transition into the fall equinox. And there's so much right now in the energy field that is pulling us to pull in some of the masculine, right? But also figure out what we're surrendering and letting go as we take steps towards what's meant for us. And it just gave me chills as you were talking about, like, this has been coming up for me. I'm like, right on time, right on time. Hilarious.
oh, definitely feeling that energy though. Yes.
Yes. Oh, Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today. I would love to create a space right now for you to share about your offerings, your work, how people can come find you to get the inspiration from your socials. Share with us how we can get connected.
Yeah, absolutely. So Instagram's my main place on social media, and it's just Nicole.Burbank. I share as much education and expansion content as possible. I have some freebies on my link there, as well as my website, which is just NicoleMBurbank.com. And then really, like I said earlier, I start with nutrition first. And people think, oh, I don't need to lose weight or whatever, right? It's not about weight loss. It's about clarity of mind. And that really is the catapult to emotional intelligence and then mental resilience. And so I have a workshop, or you can work one-on-one with me. And all of that is on my website and on my social media on Instagram.
Perfect. I will put the links to all of that in the show notes below. So that's listening, you can just scroll down and click on them to go find Nicole. Nicole, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and opening your heart and diving into some deep and powerful conversations.
Yes. Thank you so much for holding this space too in the container.
It has been an honor to share this space with you today on the Empower to Heal podcast, where we illuminate the strength you have within yourself to heal. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming episodes, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform.